I'm so captivated by the way this is a beautifully told story of the movement for Black lives that has been ongoing for a while now. And it shows us the impact of the problem on a life that we come to care about very much, Bruce Franks and his young little boy. And I dare anyone to not care about that little boy and want a better world for him. You just can't not. And it also shines the light on what's possible. So it's not just the impact of the problem, but it shines the light on what's possible through the journey that Bruce goes on, both in the legislature and through a social movement. All in 28 minutes. How do you feel that this film resonates right now with especially young people who might be the age of the students that teachers are teaching, but who are aware of the broader movement for Black lives right now?
I think it's important to be honest about where we are in the fight and in the struggle. I think it's one of the reasons, there was a way to make this film that I think might leave everybody feeling great, and feeling like, there's a hero walking among us, and Bruce absolutely is a hero and has done amazing things, for his community and given so many people so much hope. But it was important for us as filmmakers to also show the struggle, and the like deep toll that the work has taken on him. And I think, the same way that he feels compelled to be honest with his son about the reality of what he's going to face as a young Black man in America, I think it's important that we also be honest with young people who are, going to pick up the fight, and carry forward the fight for justice in this country, that it's not going to be easy, that it will take a toll. And it's not, especially if you're doing it not just in a performative way, if you're really out there doing the work, it's difficult. But I hope that people can learn, from Bruce's example about what's possible, but also learn from, where things didn't work out for him in terms of, and I think he will be the first one to say this, and what he talks to people about now as he's coaching, young legislators and people of color, the young people he mentors, is that you can do something which I didn't do, which is like learn to read the signs, learn to really understand, when the work is getting to be too much, when you need to reach out, for help, when you need to talk to somebody, and how to build community around you so you're not, you don't feel alone in the fight. So I think it's important to be honest about that, and I hope that that's what the film gets across, that heroism is possible, that individuals can do amazing things, but to be prepared for the tolls that the fight will take on you.
And that self-care is a part of the work. I remember how he said that he had attended 167 funerals in his lifetime, and that is just earth-shattering. And his vision to say, yeah, this is a public health crisis, and we talk about it now as a pandemic within a pandemic type of thing, but his vision to position it that way, so that people who are on the front lines include themselves in their own work. I do think that that's really, really important. Yeah, thank you. The film was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Documentary Short, which is phenomenal and rightly well-deserved, and shows that there is the potential for films with this kind of content to really kind of break through to broader audiences, a larger industry context. And increasingly, we are seeing interest or potential interest from the industry right now, which is going through sea changes or attempting to navigate sea changes. And I think it's important to think about the ways in which the industry is trying to grapple with race, representation, accountability, authorship, ownership, all of these things. Let's talk about what we think the challenges and the opportunities might be, either for the industry or for people entering the industry now.
Definitely. I mean, I think, in many ways, it's as good a time as there's ever been for young people, particularly people of color and marginalized people, to seek out careers in the arts. because we are in some ways in the midst of a reckoning, where I've been working in the industry a long time, and I know that fundamentally, it's an industry, it's a business, right? And there is self-interest involved, and there's business interest involved, and nothing within the industry, no sort of altruistic, movement within the industry is really sustainable, unless, it doesn't happen unless there's, a specific pressure from the audiences and specific financial pressure, and I don't think it's sustainable unless it proves to be a good business decision, and that's just nature. That's just the nature of the industry, and I think it's better to sort of be aware of that and know what you're dealing with, than constantly get frustrated that change isn't happening, in the way that we hope. But I do think that people are recognizing that there is financial incentive and there is business incentive to incorporate more points of view and more diverse points of view in content. A lot of that, is the result of the work of people of color, who have been pushing, people like April Rain, who started Oscar So White, audiences who are proving time and again that content that's made for them, particularly diverse audiences, proving that content that's made for them will perform at the box office, will get ratings, will get awards, all of that. And now the industry is responding to that by saying, okay, this is what, people want, let's give them more. But it's a push and pull, right? Like we have to keep pushing. We have to keep calling out and calling in, we have to keep pushing for more diversity, not just on the creator level and on the, forward facing, like, in front of the camera, but also, amongst critics, amongst executives, decision makers of all kinds, because ultimately, someone like you, Radhi, in a position, of decision-making power, you're going to see value in a story like St. Louis Superman in a way that might take a lot longer for a colleague who doesn't, have lived experience or a direct connection, cultural connection to that type of story, might. So yeah, I do think things are changing, and I think the way that young people can be a part of that change and benefit from that change is to really hone your authentic voice, hone the story that only you can tell, try to figure out, and I don't mean that to say that we can only tell our stories, clearly I'm not, a Black person from St. Louis, and, St. Louis Superman isn't my story, it's Bruce's story. But I have a body of work, a history of work, working in Black media, working in social justice movements, and also just as a documentary filmmaker that prepared me to help Bruce tell his story. My first film was extremely personal. It's called A Suitable Girl, and it was an extremely personal film that examined, the role of women in South Asian culture and the way that's evolving and not evolving. That was a film that, that I felt only I could make. Not only, but I felt like it was very specifically from my point of view. That's where I started my career as a director. And then you can sort of expand from there. But I think a great place to start is to figure out what is the story that only you can tell? What is the story that you are uniquely suited to tell? Start there, and then, start to build from there.
Great. I'm seeing a lot of questions. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but that are really about the production journey, and so we'll touch on that in a second. But I wanted to sort of highlight one of the things that you said, which is it is our demand for this kind of content, which is going to open up more pathways for more of it to be made, both for the content and for students to have a role in the industry, to if we ourselves are saying we want both in the stories, the content that's being made and the hands that are making it to represent the world that we live in. And given that we claim we don't believe in taxation without representation, it is a fundamental value that representation. So that's really what we're talking about here. Just a second, there's so much questions here. So can you talk a little bit about sort of the journey of finding Bruce and making the documentary?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I found Bruce via a newspaper article that I read. I'm an avid reader, and like I said, I worked as a journalist, and I worked in media for a long time. I still do, in fact, my day job. And I, that I developed a habit of reading, especially reading a lot of, local newspapers, local journalism, and trying to, really find stories. That's what I did, for my career for a very long time, was just to try to keep track on social media, keep track in local news, and try to find interesting stories that weren't being told in mainstream media. And that's how I found the story of Bruce. It was, I stumbled upon a newspaper in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, a profile of him. This was shortly after he won his seat. He had an incredible race and an incredible election, took on a dynasty, a political dynasty, essentially someone whose family had held that seat for 3 generations. So his race, just getting into office was so incredible. So there was a newspaper profile about him, his background in activism, his roots in St. Louis, and how he, took on this political dynasty to run for office and to get his seat. But around that time, there was sort of other things going on, in the ether, particularly around justice movements. Erica Garner had died, around that time. Vanita Browder, Khalif Browder's mother, had died around that time. And I personally was thinking a lot about the tolls of activism, the tolls that activism take. And so when I read about Bruce, that is what I wondered, was at that point, he had been in office for over a year. And I wondered, what is it like for a 34-year-old Black man to be trying to make change in one of the whitest and most conservative legislative bodies in the country? And what kind of toll, is that taking? What kind of conversations does he have to have with his colleagues? What kind of wounds does he have to rip open every day, in order to make change for his community? What kind of conversations does he have to have with his kids? How does, all of those questions kind of came to mind before I even met him, and so I pursued him, for months. I didn't get any response for several months, and which is, completely justified because, Bruce came up, in the Ferguson movement, and he saw a lot of extractive filmmaking and a lot of extractive storytelling, people coming in for a weekend, putting together, a news package or a documentary and leaving and not really, kind of projecting what they felt, about the movement onto the movement. So he was like, filmmaker from Los Angeles, I am not, I'm calling her back. So I, it took a while, but finally I got him to call me back. And I told him, there's no obligation. I explained, my style as a filmmaker is very much, to develop a relationship with the participants and the people that I asked to make a film about. And then it's a two-way street, it's all about trust and communication and chemistry. And I said, all I'm asking is to meet you. I will come to St. Louis. Just any day you can have lunch with me, I will be there. And I just want to have lunch or coffee with you and let's talk. And if you feel, I could do service, or do justice to your story, then we can talk further. And I said, ultimately, I have no objective. I have no plan. I have no outline of what your story should be. My job is to help you figure out, if you have a platform in 30 minutes and whatever to tell your story, what is that story? And we can figure it out together. And I think that really resonated with Bruce. And honestly, that was the process. It's it was a very deliberate decision, who all came to the table around this film. It started with Bruce and I. And then I wanted to work with my directing partner, Sami Khan, because like me, we have very similar approaches to documentary filmmaking. It's a very non-intrusive, very observational, approach. And, we also just hold strong beliefs about amplifying stories about people who are really fighting for justice. So I asked him to work with me on the film. I brought the story to Po Si Tang at Witness, Al Jazeera, the documentary strand of Al Jazeera English, because, Po had reached out to me after seeing A Suitable Girl, wanting to work on something together. And I knew her from those conversations. I knew her to be someone who is extremely patient and extremely open, about, and very supportive of the filmmakers' visions, you know, of the films that are made, that she commissions. And this is very difficult, you know, Radhi, you know as well as anybody how difficult it is to find that kind of support. And I knew this was a film that needed that kind of patience. I knew this wasn't a film where I could be, you know, present an outline and say, this is the film we're making,
And
you
just,
know, and deliver.
yeah.
And just deliver that. You know, it was going to be a process of discovery, so I needed to be working with people who were going to allow and embrace that process. And we just honestly had like the most incredible team around this film from day one. You know, people who were really in it for the right reasons. You know, and I think if you followed our, you know, festival and Academy Awards journey, you always see us together. You know, Bruce was with us at every screening, every Q&A, every interview, you know, every event, you know, about
That
the
tells a
film.
lot.
He was
That
there.
tells a lot. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So yeah, it was an incredible experience, and you know,
I feel like it's
and
a
that's
real.
also, I think,
Uh-huh.
yeah, just saying that's also something to consider. You know, like. I know it's tempting, you know, to grab any money that's available because money is so scarce, you know, and opportunity can feel so scarce. But, you know, like try to pay attention to your gut instinct about whether something feels right, you know, and if it doesn't feel right, especially if it's a story that's really precious and really personal to you, you know, maybe hold on for a better partner.
Uh-huh. That's a great note. And I feel like it's a real reflection that, you know, your approach to telling the story kind of matched, you know, your values in terms of being with the participants and, you know, how can you contribute to amplifying, you know, their own story versus, you know, again, as you said, an extractive model. And I feel like it also shows how in the story itself, there's a mirroring between the journey of the narrative journey in the story and the journey of a social movement in a way that we are trying to show a journey toward a new possibility, right? We're trying to create a different future. And that's what he's doing. And that's what we really follow versus you definitely feel the impact of the problem, but you see an idea and you shine the light on that. And I believe that what we shine the light on is what grows, be that for social movements and be that in the stories that we tell about our future. So I really love that you did that in your work.
Thank you.
And with Bruce, so yeah, it's beautiful. Is there anything that you wish you could have added to the film but couldn't, or if you were doing a feature version you would have added in, or you know, that kind of thing, things that you had to leave on the cutting room floor but that mattered to you know, the telling of the content?
Well, if Bruce was here, he would say, you know, that he's extremely pissed off that we didn't include footage of him bowling a perfect game. Bruce is like a semi-professional bowler, and he's like passionate about bowling, and so we filmed a lot of him bowling. And when we were filming him bowling one day, he bowled a perfect game, and we just didn't include that in the film. And he was like, "That's the one thing, you know, I wanted in the film." There's a couple of other things. For me too, that I wish, you know, we could have had found space for in the film. I know it's going to sound silly, but we have like footage of Bruce like singing Rod Stewart at the top of his lungs, you know, while he's driving, you know, to and from the Capitol. It's amazing, and like him and his mother, you know, rapping to LL Cool J on their front porch. I mean, those are just moments that like we love, and you know, we had so much fun like being a part of while we were filming. But beyond that, you know, I think one of the reasons that I really wish we could have included more of that, you know, in the film was to also show the joy in his life, you know, and, you know, how important that is to just not only sort of identify people, particularly people of color, through their trauma, but also their joy and their connectedness, their closeness with their families, you know. And I think we had some of that, you know, with King and, you know, in other ways, but there was so much of that, you know, that, you know, was really, I mean, you know, as much as, you know, Bruce has had to carry on his shoulders in terms of, his life and all the death that he's experienced, of loved ones and close ones, and, the movement and the politics and all of that, he also has incredible support, and he's got a great family and a community that idolizes him. So it would have been great to show more of that.
That's great. That's great. And we did get to see him, with his kids, and they go to the park, and, his little son and everything. But I do think I like that you said that, because, there is this understanding that amplifying Black joy is in itself a kind of resistance, and not forcing African Americans and other people of color to be in this kind of problem victim paradigm, but really to be 360 whole people with agency and vision and love and tenderness and vulnerability and all of that. So thank you for having me.
And flaws too, right? Like, we all deserve to be flawed human beings as much as the others, right?
Deserve to be flawed without it being completely damning, and that's very hard, because, of course, we're hyper criminalized and always assumed to be, incompetent and all of these other things. And so you do get this tendency toward Black exceptionalism and everything and you have to be perfect, and that's no way to be either.
Yeah. It's a lot to carry too.
Yeah. Do you know if people are using this film in education and in classrooms? I think that the people in this room are going to be.
I certainly hope so. I mean, we've been absolutely encouraging that. We, of course, we have distributors who technically, control the copyright of the film, but honestly, we've been very free and loose about making the film available, particularly for the people that it was made for, honestly, for people, in communities like Bruce's, for educators, we really wanted to take the film outside of the, film festival award circuit, environment, and make sure it was available to people, who need to see stories like this and who want to see stories like this. So yeah, if there's any educators out there who want access to the film, reach out to me or reach out to Ashley. We'll make sure you get it.
And I think Ashley or somebody did add it into the chat, the channels and so on where people could look for it. But yeah, you can follow up with Ashley. And I did see some folks talking about that they are working in, majority white institutions, and most likely the young people, the students who they're talking to, after, this spring and summer, have some idea of why these things matter. But I feel like sometimes we can be a little bit ahistorical and forget that young people may not know. This was in the New York Times that 5 African Americans have been killed every week by the police this year alone, like every week. That's in the New York Times. And that in the LA Times, the LA Police Department has been 54% of our city budget, and so we have our public institutions, our agencies of the state really hunting African American people. And when I was coming up in Los Angeles, LAPD had this code on the radio. If a Black person was killed, they would say NHI, no humans involved. And so we lose the context of why we talk about and use this language about Black Lives Matter. And I think it's important that young people are able to understand, why this matters in this way.
And this is all part of our history, right? This is all, should be part of our education. This is part of our social studies, and we should know it. We have to know it.
Exactly. Well, I'm putting some resources into the chat. These are incubator programs for young people who are interested in documentary film once they get beyond the high school arena, or as they reach their later teenage years. And to quote Bruce Franks, he says, "What I learned is that telling your story is gonna help somebody." And I love that. And then at the end of the film, when they're out in the street and he lifts up his boy and they say, I believe that we will win. And it's just, you have to let that move you forward into forward motion, whether that is making films about the movement, participating in the movement, or hopefully both.
Yeah,
What do you think?
definitely. And like storytelling is such an important part of history, of keeping a record of history, of activism, of resistance. It is, I mean, I always try to tell myself this. I may feel like the films that I make, especially when I make things on a very independent level, may just feel like the tiniest ripple, in a pond. But, at some point, at some time, maybe 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 100 years from now, some graduate student is going to look back, or a high school student is going to be working on a, paper about, gender roles in India or justice movements in the United States, or, whatever it is, and hopefully find these stories, these films, and, these books and all of these things as part of that record, of where we are as a culture. And I think storytelling is like the most powerful way. It's like take things out of beyond just like facts, and things that are like in history books, and really shows us the way people are living history. So I think it's a really important tool, and like it's never insignificant. 5 people see your film today, it's still significant. It's still, you're bearing witness to history, and that is really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's bearing witness to history, and in some ways at the same time rewriting the future because of
Yeah.
the way it calls us forward. Yeah, so beautiful, well done. Thank you. And people are also thanking you.
I thank everybody.
And thank you to AME for having Smriti and me on for this conversation. Thank you to all of the teachers in the room for all of your leadership, building the storytellers of today and tomorrow. Because without that, where would we be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are out there doing the real work.
Exactly.